Yeah, ma'am. We are on live, ma'am. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, okay. Okay, thank you, Digital team. So, hello everyone. So we have our guest today is Mr. Dr. Aswin Viswanathan, and he's currently working as a research associate at the Nature Conservation Foundation (NCF), and his expertise ranges widely from ecosystem, community, ecology, and evolution to citizen science. And he graduated his PhD from ETH Zurich, and the full form of ETH. I don't think I can pronounce it, so you can Google it and search it. But during his PhD research, he looked at how biotic interactions save plant communities and how these interactions are disturbed due to the habitat fragmentation and well. And currently at the NCF, at the NCF, he's working on two projects: Bird Count India and State of India Bird, under the program called Education and Public Engagement Program. So these projects has helped in developing the information, in collecting the information throughout bird watching for better documentation, which can increase in better understanding of the distribution pattern and population of the bird, and how this information from this bird watching can influence better understanding of the seasonality towards their distribution and their conservation as well. So I think he's the right person to interact with for those who are interested in birding and want to know how birding might contribute to the societies and awareness to the people. So today he's going to talk about all that, the topic citizen science and ornithology. So over to you, Aswin.
Yeah, thanks, Sonia, and happy to be here again. And a number of familiar names in the audience. So I'll be talking to you about citizen science broadly, and I'll take you through what citizen science is and a brief history of citizen science or at least bird-related citizen science in India, and what we can learn from it, or what we have learned from it, rather. I'll just share my screen. So I always wish, or rather hope, that such interactions can be in person, where we can actually interact and there can be questions, etc. That may not be so easy now, but I still ask some questions. Feel free to type what you can in the chat. Yeah, or raise your hand and we can take some directly as well. So citizen science, some of you have seen this map previously. Some of you haven't. I'll explain what it is, but it broadly represents the spread of people in the country and of how when so many people come together in the country, you have the entire country being lit up. And I'll explain what this is. So what is citizen science? So it's basically public participation in scientific research, something that many of you have already done previously. But it's not just participation in research or participation in the process of collecting data that citizen science is often mistaken to be, but it's public involvement in the entire process of science, from getting ideas, asking questions, designing methodologies, analyzing data. Analyzing data is something that a number of people tend to avoid doing, but I think that's a really important part of citizen science. And of course, the final process of publishing, which is an important part of science, to put the information out there so that people can consume it. So I think public participation in this entire process is what is truly citizen science. And it also often involves a collaboration with professional scientists who can guide the process at times, who can provide that structure, because they're trained in that structure. So why is public participation important? What are we going to lose out, for example, if the public wasn't going to participate in ornithology or any discipline of science? So especially when we're dealing with the natural world and we are in the middle of a bit of a crisis in the natural world, public participation in any natural sciences creates a community who can appreciate all the natural world around us. So by engaging more in that field, we tend to appreciate it more and more. And I think that's really important. The entire country or the entire world should be in a place where they can appreciate the natural world. It also generates knowledge about many things that cannot be addressed by a few scientists who are scattered here and there in the country. So you can imagine the number of professional ornithologists in India, it can be counted on maybe a few hands, maybe not one person, but we are probably dealing with 40, 50 professional ornithologists in the country, maybe not more than that, maybe a little more. But but this is a very small number of people looking at the scale of the country. And expanding that perhaps even to the scale of the world. These are very, very few people. So there's so much more that can be done if the public participates in science. And finally, something that I think many people here also will appreciate the importance of, when the public develops scientific temperament, we end up being in a much better place to manage our country in so many ways. Everything from managing resources to having a better political system, everything becomes better. Taking decisions for policy, everything becomes better if everybody has a scientific temperament. So these are 3 reasons, at least. I'm sure you can think of many more as to why public participation is important. So citizen science and ornithology, we're going to specifically speak about ornithology, of course. But when did it start in India? Many of you, I'm sure, are part of citizen science programs even now and participate in various ways. But when did it all begin? So one of the first citizen science programs in India was the Asian Waterbird Census, where in 1987, there was a call for people to monitor wetlands. And to monitor wetlands in some systematic way, collect certain data and allow that to be aggregated so that we can learn more about the state of birds in our wetlands. So this was started by the Wetlands International. That moved on, and that brought a lot of people into birding. That brought a lot of people into a slightly more systematic pursuit of participating in a greater initiative. That then led to the formation of a number of groups, a number of nature groups, and this coincided with the growth of internet in India and elsewhere. And a number of these online groups sprung up, like Yahoo groups and India Nature Watch, places where people could come together and share share photographs, share their observations, etc. And this is, you would say, a very basic form of science, but with one of the outcomes being in place, that there was sharing of knowledge and there was a growth of collective knowledge, where if I share observations with somebody else, I get feedback from them. We both learn a little more about what this was all about. So this is what these platforms enabled. And there were a number of these groups that sprung up. So there's a Bangalore BNG Birds Yahoo group, there's Delhi Birds. There are many of these groups that allowed people to come together and do things that were greater than what they could do individually. There was Migrant Watch that came up in 2007. And so I've been a birder for quite a while now, since my childhood. And when Migrant Watch first started in 2007, at least for me, it immediately felt like a way to contribute, to make something more of my birding. So previously I used to watch birds, I used to enjoy it, and that's where it ended. But suddenly there was this opportunity to contribute that information somewhere. And I was somebody who immediately took to Migrant Watch, and I started uploading observations I was in Rajasthan at that point, and I would upload observations of rosy starling and grey wagtail when they first came to where I was, when they left, and all of this information that I had in me that I was observing every time, but nobody else was able to actually get that information from me. There was no way to do that. And that is where this platform immediately gave that opportunity. So this was attractive to many people around the country. And Migrant Watch, in a way, set the stage for some of these larger citizen science platforms that we see today, like eBird, India Biodiversity Portal, iNaturalist, various other platforms that have sprung up that allow this kind of observations to be uploaded in ways that help for the greatest scientific advancement. So with these platforms in place, a number of other programs sprung up to monitor birds. There's the Great Backyard Bird Count. Note that these use some of those previous platforms that I mentioned as tools. So Great Backyard Bird Count, there's a Common Bird Monitoring Program, then number of regional festival-based programs that have come up. And all of these are ways to both encourage people to watch more birds, but also do something slightly systematic for a short period of time that can then enable comparisons in the long term. So every year now for the last 5 or 6 years, there's been the Pongal bird count. The Great Backyard Bird Count has happened every year since 2013 now in India. And all of these are for 4-day windows where people follow some systematic protocols to monitor birds. So for the rest of this talk, I'll use examples from eBird to show what is possible through these citizen science endeavors. Now we're using these platforms, we're using these tools, we have some monitoring efforts and programs. What can we learn out of all of this, and where has all of this left us, this growth of citizen science in India? So just to show how participation in general bird citizen science, or in the use of eBird as a tool, or participation in GBBC, how that has grown, I'll just show you a small graph after this. But first, I want to explain to you what is eBird. So eBird is just a tool to be able to document birds, to document observations. It is the same as a digital notebook. You can, what we previously used to do, write in our notebooks. We used to write bird lists in our notebooks. We would note down specific information. We would make illustrations. Now, eBird is one of many online tools that allows all of this to be uploaded online. So it's a digital notebook. You can upload your checklist online. You can upload photographs online. You can upload audio online. You can upload all of this online. And now suddenly when you upload it online, it goes into a common database that can then be accessed by everyone. So this is what an eBird checklist might look like. A set of species, how many minutes, were you moving or were you not, were you in one place? What you see in the bottom left of the screen is the eBird app, which allows this kind of upload. And since 2014, when people started uploading to eBird in India, there's been a huge growth in data. And this map that I showed you previously with all the yellow dots, this is actually just a map of all points, all locations from where data has been uploaded to eBird in India. And if you see, this makes up the entire political map of the country. So most corners of the country, it just spread out all across. It's an incredible public endeavor and an incredible data set that has built up. Now of 41 million observations, more than 2 million checklists, 40,000 birders in India who uploaded to this, and there are many more people can participate, and all 1,355 species. Let me know if there are any questions at any point. Right? This has been the growth of GBBC over the years. So what you see are the orange line. The top line is the number of total checklists uploaded during that 4-day period. And as you can see, there's almost exponential growth in how many more people are participating. So where has this left us? What can we learn from citizen science initiatives? There are a number of different types of learning that we can get from such databases. This includes understanding of distributions. Understanding of distributions is, of course, really important for policy, for conservation, for generally our engagement with birds around us, to know what is there in different places. There's seasonality and migration. And this is a wonderful way to learn about seasonality and migration at a large scale. And this is, of course, a phenomenal event, migration. And this is something that really captures the public imagination, and this is something that we can learn from this database. We can also do bird atlases and systematic efforts. We can do some systematic monitoring. We can find out how birds are increasing or decreasing in certain areas and decide which birds require conservation priority. in certain areas. We can also do bird atlases. Some of you would have heard of some bird atlases that have been done in India. I'll briefly mention that a little later. And then we can find out broad status and trends. Or in other words, we can assess the health of our birds using this database. And I'll again explain how that has been done and how that is done. Can also use it for other kinds of conservation. But first, I'll talk about how you can use inbuilt tools on the eBird platform itself, on the eBird website, to learn more about birds. And I think this is something that's really important. And I suggest that if you have your computers around you, immediately start exploring as I speak to you about this. Because one of the, when we try and learn about certain data sets, and we try to learn about birds and learn about citizen science, I think it's really important that we become comfortable with these platforms and see what we can learn directly from these platforms. That can give really important ideas that can take you further in your ornithology pursuits. So if you go to the website, you'll find something like this. Go to the eBird India website, which is ebird.org/India. Then go to the Explore tab. And if you go there, you'll see these options. You'll see an option that says Explore Species. You'll see an option that says Explore Regions. Then your species maps, explore hotspots, search photos and sounds, and bar charts. I hope all of you have something open. So what can you do here? I think, at least according to me, one of the most interesting explore options that you can learn from is bar charts. So click on bar charts. I'll go back to that page. You see bar charts in the bottom right corner. Click on bar charts. Select any region of interest. You can select a state, you can select districts, you can select hotspots within those districts, or even locations, even personal locations of yours. You get something like this. Choose a location. I've selected India, Karnataka. I've selected the entire region of Karnataka. Then click on continue. Now you will be able to view bar charts for a range of species. And this is an immediate way to understand seasonality, and a really useful way to understand seasonality. What do we get? We get something like this. What can we see from this? If somebody has any doubts about interpretation, let me know. But this is as simple as every month of the year, you see whether that species is every week of every month of the year, rather, you see what the likelihood of that species being reported is based on the data. So lesser whistling duck is approximately, you're equally likely to find it across Karnataka during any week of the year. But if you look at bar-headed goose, it's very clearly a winter migrant. It comes in early November and leaves during late March. Is that clear to everybody how to interpret bar charts like this? Ruddy shelduck, it comes again in early November. It leaves a little later, maybe in April, or sometimes even early May. You have something like shoveler down in the bottom that arrives much earlier, that arrives in September itself and leaves sometime in mid-April, mid or late April. And then there are a few scattered records here and there. So this is how you interpret this. Note that you can also click on, if you click on the map symbol here, you can go to the distribution map of that species. You click on the line symbol here, the diagonal line, and you can go to many other interesting outputs that are associated with seasonality. So there's a lot that you can learn from this, and many questions, many research questions that can come up out of this to find out, why is it that a species comes at a certain time? Is it, are these patterns changing? For example, if you look at 2022 versus 2021 versus 2020, are there changes? Are there consistent changes across the years in terms of when birds are arriving and leaving? And these can give you important research ideas associated with climate change, about how birds are responding perhaps. So this is something that you can keep tabs on. So you'll be able to view bar charts for a range of species, an important way to understand seasonality. Click on the line graphs icon near northern shoveler, in particular over here, and I'll just show you what is possible there. You can click on change date after that and select the last 5 years, and then click on separate years. So just note this down. And if you're not able to do it now, do it later, but you will get something like this. Now, this is what I was talking about. This is really interesting because you can compare year after year. So what do you see here? So for example, 2019, bar-headed geese were extremely likely in winter. More than maybe 2020, they were a little less common. But here, what you see is that bar-headed goose typically, northern shoveler typically hasn't changed so much in how likely it is across the years. I suggest you go through a number of species, those that you are interested in, for an area that you are interested in, and see how things have changed between years. Are there some years when Indian pitta has come in big numbers? Are there years when it hasn't come at all? What may have led to that? Are there years when certain other waterfowl have come in big numbers and some years when they haven't? Does it feel like some birds are coming in smaller numbers increasingly over the years? Are we able to see this in the line graphs? Right? So it's extremely important to allow data to be able to inform you in these ways. So any doubts about this, put a question in the chat box and I'll take it later. So comparing between years can help you develop questions about migration or climate. Then you can dig deeper into what the reasons might be. And as I said, can you find some species which frequencies that are fluctuating between years? Do take a look. Another thing you can do directly from the platform without downloading the data, without doing anything more, is you can learn from images. So there are a huge number of photos that have been uploaded over all seasons, over most parts of the country and world on the platform. So you see, this is this particular image is maybe a few months old. Back then, there were little more than 25 million images that had been uploaded, confirmed images that had been uploaded to eBird and the Macaulay library where media is stored on eBird. But there is a lot more. Now maybe we're close to about 30 million confirmed photographs uploaded to the platform. So you see that this is a wonderful place to learn more. So go to these photos, see what more you can learn, right? But I'll also explain what it is that we have learned from photos so far. So now I'll leave this behind. Another thing I'd like to mention right here is that directly from the eBird webpage in India, if you go to any species page, if you go to explore, put any species in it, you'll also get a link to the Birds of the World account for that species. If you haven't heard of Birds of the World is this one-stop encyclopedia about birds across the world for India's birds as well. And if you want to learn anything about breeding, behavior, anything about their habitats, about their taxonomic history, anything that you want to learn, you can go to Birds of the World and find out more. And all you need to do to access it is to sign in with your eBird account. And from anywhere in India, it's freely accessible. So please make use of this resource to learn more about birds. So now I'll get to some of these other things that you can learn about: distributions, seasonality and migration, bird atlases, and status and trends. I'll start off with distributions. So using data that has been uploaded for different seasons across the world, you can make these amazing predicted maps of where birds are likely to occur during different seasons. So this is the distribution range map of Blythe's reed warbler. And what can you see here? Blythe's reed warbler breeds in northern and northwestern Europe, across some parts of Scandinavia, Russia, Poland, etc. And it's a passage migrant through some parts of Central and West Asia. And almost the entire global population winters or spends the non-breeding season within the Indian subcontinent. You see India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, etc. This entire region. And what you also have here is not every point over here actually has a record of Blythe's reed warbler. This is a combination of data and observations that have been uploaded and a predictive model that all of the data has been used to come up with. right? So this has been done by eBird, and it's available. All of these maps or predicted maps are available on the website. Indian blue robin, another interesting one, breeds in mid to high altitudes in the Himalayas, in most of the Himalayas, and in parts of China, etc. It's a passage migrant in spring through many other parts of Northeast, West Bengal, some of the hills, Naga Hills, etc. And winters entirely in the Western Ghats in Sri Lanka and some other hills in South India. So you see it matches certain contours, and these are the habitats that the species likes. The kind of learning that we can get from data like this. Now, with a combination of photos that are uploaded on the platform on eBird and some idea of seasonality of when certain photos have been uploaded, you can get some really interesting insights that are ecologically interesting. So, for example, Paradise flycatcher has a white morph and a brown morph, Paradise flycatcher males. Now, for many years, there's been this question of when are Paradise flycatchers white, when are males white, when are they brown? And there have been many theories that brown are young birds, and after a while, all birds become white, all breeding birds have to be white, etc. But looking at data that's been uploaded across the country, not just photos, but also observations that have been uploaded without photos, where there's a mention of white or rufous. This also includes other social media platforms like Facebook, etc. Information from that. Combining all of this, it appears that this is a slightly complex graph. I'll take you through it. That during the breeding season, you look at the top left panel. During the breeding season in Sri Lanka and South India, there are almost no white males. All photos and all observations of breeding birds birds during the breeding season in Sri Lanka and South India have been of rufous males. And with a slightly deeper look, it appears that nobody has evidence of a white breeding male in the south. But we all see a lot of white breeding males in South India. That's because in winter, you see that the proportions almost equalize. Look at the bottom left panel. In Sri Lanka and South India, both white morph and rufous morph birds become almost equally frequent. They are equally likely to be encountered in winter. So it looks like while most breeding birds in the south are rufous, white birds appear to migrate from the north to the south and fill up the south as well during winter. But we see some intermediate birds, don't we? We also see in the north, if you look at the first graph, if you look at central, north, and east, there's actually almost an equal proportion of rufous and white males. So what is happening here? Is it that that there are two different morphs in some places, but in the south there's only rufous, and in the Himalayas there's almost only white? Is that what is happening, or is there something happening in, let's say, in the north, where rufous are young birds and they become white eventually? So these are some open questions. What is happening? But what we know is that there's this clear progression. You look at this. Look at the top left panel. There's a downward progression as we go from south to north of the likelihood of rufous birds, and there's an increasing progression of the likelihood of white birds. So what does this all mean? This is new learning and knowledge that we've got from the database. But now the next step is for ornithologists, researchers to ask the next question and find out how and why this is happening and what is the story behind this. This platform has also allowed us to potentially even discover new species. May or may not be new species, but this is where bird networks can ask questions. So a good example of public participation in the asking of questions as well. So this idea was conceptualized on a WhatsApp group, a Bangalore Birders WhatsApp group, where it includes, Bangalore is of course very cosmopolitan. It includes people from all over the country. And at one point, somebody put a photograph of a white breeding black-breasted weaver. And then somebody who had lived in Bombay mostly came back and said that this cannot be a black-breasted weaver because this is not how they look. And these people said, yes, this is what a black-breasted weaver is, the people who have lived in Bangalore mostly. And then the people from Bombay, they posted their own black-breasted weaver photos, and they look like the birds in the top right. And the birds at the bottom are white-faced during the breeding season. And it appeared that what is considered to be black-breasted weaver can look completely different in different parts of the country. Right? So then a broader investigation was done. So this was the question that was asked: what is going on? Is there any geographical pattern to the black-headed birds and the white-headed birds? So looking deeper into the data, looking at photos that have been uploaded to eBird and the Macaulay Library, we found out that actually there is a clear geographic pattern. All birds in the south and east of the country become white-headed during the breeding season. Birds in the western and northwestern part of the country become dark-headed during the breeding season. And there appears to be quite a large area of separation. And so far it appears that there's no area where both birds have been found, both white-headed and dark-headed. So there's something really interesting going on. Are these different species altogether? Are these, do they have different songs? Can they even breed if brought together? Can they procreate together? So we don't know, but it appears that even their vocalization songs are different in these different regions. But this is an ongoing study. Now, what happened next is again a very important part of public participation in science and of citizen science in its best form, where all of the birders involved in this research, involved in both the idea and the implementation of the analysis that led to these findings, came together and also published a paper that published a research article that details all of these findings. So I think that is how it should be: public participation in every part of the process. Now I'll move on to migration. What has this database allowed us to learn about migration? And many of you may have seen these migration maps that are available on the BirdCount India website. And if you haven't, you can visit, you can check these out on the BirdCount India, birdcount.in website. So there's a lot that we can learn. There's a lot that we can learn because the traditional way to learn about migration has been through satellite tagging. But that can be done for very few birds. You can attach GPS transmitters and satellite trackers on birds on just a few individuals. And that's invaluable knowledge about where that individual is going and coming. But if you have a situation where thousands and thousands of bird watchers around the world come and put their snapshot observations, by following how the locations of these observations change over time, we can actually get an illusion of migration and understand where birds are going to and where they're coming from. So I'll show you some, first I'll take you through the methods used to produce this, and then I'll take you through some examples. So how do you go about something like this? You can now download eBird data that is publicly available for any species. You can generate snapshot bird distributions at regular intervals throughout the year. Stitch them all together into a GIF or a video. And then plot also a frequency chart that tracks how likely you are to encounter that bird during different parts of the year. So this will become clearer when I show the map. All of this is done using a software called R. So I'll first show you an example of migration within the subcontinent. Indian pitta, a bird that all of us love. What do you see over here? During the winter, note the graph at the bottom left. You see that it tracks the frequency over time. So it's more likely to be encountered during the breeding season, which is April, May, June, and also quite likely to be encountered during migration, which is October to December. Now during winter, note that they're all coming south. They filled up South India and Sri Lanka, and as summer progresses, they're migrating further north. And now in winter, they're coming back south. If you have any doubts about how to interpret this graph, let me know. But what about breeding in the north and migrating south for winter? by which I mean breeding outside India and migrating south to India for the winter. Blythe-Reed warbler is a great example, something I showed you in that previous distribution map. But what you see here is that the entire species comes into India during winter, India and the subcontinent, and migrates up into Russia and thereabouts during summer. You see, and this, and even if you don't know anything about the migration of a species, you can take all the data, you can plot it in this way, and then you can find out more. What about breeding in the south and migrating north for the summer? So we always hear about birds that breed in the north and migrate south for the winter. But what about migrating south for the summer? We do have one species that does this, Pallas fish eagle. So Pallas fish eagle comes to India in winter. As you can see, India and Bangladesh, it breeds in India and Bangladesh during winter, and during summer, it leaves the country and goes back for the non-breeding season to Mongolia and thereabouts. I'm sure many of you have heard of Pallas fish eagle. I don't know whether all of you are aware that it's actually migratory, almost entirely migratory. What about passage migration? What is passage migration? Passage migration is the consistent moving through a place without it actually spending either the winter or the summer there. It moves, there are many birds that move through India to go to other places to spend the winter and move back through that region to go somewhere else to spend the summer. For example, Amur falcon, very famous example because they're quite iconic in Northeast India. Huge numbers of them pass through Nagaland and other parts of Northeast during autumn, October, November. Then they pass through the subcontinent and cross the Arabian Sea and make their way to Africa. And then in spring, they move much quicker. They quickly move back to their breeding areas. What about eastward migration into Southeast Asia and Australia? So there are birds that do this as well. And a good example is white-throated needletail, where almost the entire global population, including all the birds that breed in the Himalayas, actually go and winter in Australia. And this is quite incredible. This was a phenomenon that was not so well known. But we found that both white-throated needletail and oriental pratincoal, both species appear to migrate all the way from India to Australia to spend the winter. And during COVID, where Australia was locked down, where there was no biological material that was exchanged, people weren't going in and out. We still had needletails, pratincoals, etc., making this big journey, as well as many shorebirds. What about opposite migration, as they call it, migrating from the south to the north, which means that during our northern winter, they're actually down in the south. I'll explain this. This is possible for birds that breed in the southern hemisphere, where winter and summer are interchanged. So when it's winter for us, it's actually summer for them, which is when they're breeding down in the Antarctic, Wilson's storm petrel. And when it becomes summer for us, they come all the way up in the world and winter across the Indian Ocean and many other oceans in the world. So you see that actually the time when most birds have left India, Wilson's storm petrel has come in there as a summer visitor. But actually it's winter in the southern hemisphere where it breeds. Comparing migratory routes. This is also something you can do from this. So you have Isabelline and Braunschweig, both relatively common birds in India, but you see that they have almost parallel diagonal migratory routes, breeding in the northeast parts of the world and wintering in Asia and in India, parts of Africa and the Middle East. Again, interesting insights you can get by analyzing this data, producing GIFs. Tracking new migratory routes, and this is really important for climate change. So these are two examples. Yellow-browed warbler. Yellow-browed warbler previously was thought to winter only in Southeast Asia, Northeast India and Southeast Asia, and breeds in the northeastern temperate parts of the world, in Russia, Mongolia, China, etc. But increasingly what's been happening is that yellow-browed warbler has been migrating westwards as well. So what you see, this entire bunch of birds popping up in Western Europe, during winter. This was something that didn't happen in the past. This is an entirely new migratory route that appears to have sprung up. What does this mean for the species? Does it change anything about its conservation status, etc.? We still don't know. But there are so many things changing, and why they are changing is something we need to understand. Is it because of changing wind currents? Is it because of changing climate in certain parts of their breeding and wintering range? All open questions that we don't have an answer to. Some other interesting phenomena, Arctic warbler. Arctic warbler was another bird that used to breed mostly in eastern Russia and thereabouts, and winter in Southeast Asia. But increasingly, their breeding range has expanded all the way west. Now they breed all the way into Finland and Norway. But the most interesting thing is they continue to winter in exactly the same area. So although they have gone so far west in their breeding range, they make longer and longer and longer journeys to continue to the same areas where they have historically or evolutionarily adapted to winter. Do you see? Just see how they're migrating. Ones all the way in the western parts of Eurasia are migrating down into Southeast Asia, Andamans and those areas. And exactly the opposite for northern Vitia. Northern Vitia, the entire global population winters in Africa, but now they breed all the way into northeastern Russia. So birds in northeastern Russia are going into Africa to spend the winter. So some new learning and questions. What about black-cap kingfisher? We all, for many years, thought that black-cap kingfisher was a resident bird in India, but it appears that it's almost entirely migratory. It's a winter visitor to our mangrove ecosystems mostly, and our mangrove ecosystems, therefore, are extremely important for the species in during their winter non-breeding season. And this is a species that has undergone huge global declines. So we've now learned that conserving our mangrove ecosystems might be extremely important for this species. So all of these maps are downloadable at the Bird Count India website. Go to the website /migration-maps-home. Bird atlases. What is a bird atlas? A bird atlas is a systematic effort. By systematic, I've used the word systematic a few times. It means that there are fixed protocols. People spend the same amount of time birding, go to predefined locations, predefined areas. They follow a fixed protocol of only spending so much effort or time birding. So let's say you make 15-minute counts of birds within predefined areas, and this introduces a structured or some systematic element to the data collection, which then means that comparisons are very easy. If we do an atlas in Kerala today and repeat it maybe 15-20 years down the line, these are very easily comparable. Whereas if I am just recreationally birding, I am making a checklist uploaded to eBird, let's say now, for 10 minutes. Somebody else makes a checklist for half an hour. That's a little difficult to compare. If you have these protocols being the same, then you can compare these easily. So that is why atlases are so wonderful. So if you haven't looked at this atlas yet, or the data from this atlas yet, do check out the Kerala Bird Atlas. Check out the Mysore Bird Atlas, which is actually the first bird atlas to be done in India, and see what amazing insights have come out of those. And I would also encourage you, if you like playing with data, download that data and see what you can learn from something like this. For uncovering new ranges for some birds, could it be due to more data coming from that region recently? Yes, that can easily be the case. So for example, yellow-browed warbler, we are finding that it's more and more common in South India nowadays. And historically, it wasn't known to be there in South India. But we don't know whether this is because we didn't have so much birding in those habitats in South India, or was it overlooked? Or is it that the bird has actually expanded its range into South India as well? But for Western Europe, there's been a lot of ringing going back 50, 100 years even. And they've been repeated at the same ringing stations where this bird was never caught in the past. It's being increasingly caught today as well. So in addition to this evidence from citizen science data, there's also a lot of other evidence indicating that birds like yellow-browed warbler, Richard's pipit, all of these are changing their migratory routes to become increasingly common in Western Europe. So for some, you need this additional evidence, and you ask a really important question here. So we need to be careful about that before interpreting. So another thing that can be done from the data is conservation threat monitoring. This is an interesting one where there are certain threats like collisions with glass that are very poorly understood in India. As we know in India now, this phenomenon of buildings using more and more glass is only increasing. It wasn't a thing culturally in India earlier, but in places like North America, Canada, I mean in like parts of North America like US and Canada, some parts of Europe, buildings have been using glass for quite a while now, and the impacts of glass in buildings is now quite well understood, where one estimate says that over 1 billion birds die every year in North America due to collisions with glass, because birds are not able to assess that barrier, are not able to find that barrier. So how important is this in India? We need some way to find out. So there's a preliminary study that was done by a few people where they looked at eBird data for one, but also other data that certain rescue organizations have of how a bird was brought in there, under what circumstances, had they hit any glass or buildings, and what was the cause of death or injury. So some of this information was there with rescue centers. Some of it was also uploaded onto platforms like eBird, iNaturalist, etc. And you can use comments in species to actually find out whether anybody said this, collision, glass, etc. Is there any information of that kind as a part of the checklist comments? So analyzing that, it appears that from a short analysis now, this can be, this was now about 2 years old. There can be more done. But it appears that about 51 species are already documented on these platforms to have collided with buildings. And birds all over the country appear to be prone to collisions. But there are some other patterns also that are emerging. For example, 2 species that contributed perhaps the most to collisions or died the most were pitta and oriental dwarf kingfisher. Both amazingly beautiful birds and really iconic. And it appears that these are especially prone to collisions during migration, September to December. So this is what the data says. So what can we learn from this? We can learn that during migration, at least, we need to provide safeguards wherever there is glass, at least. But birds as a whole, this is looking at all species except those 2, it appears that any time of the year, they are prone to collisions. So this kind of data is really important in informing the extent of a problem and what can be done about it. But maybe the most important outcome out of citizen science data today in India is an understanding of population or abundance trends. And how can this be done? This can be done by calculating reporting frequency and tracking it over time. Let's say that bird A was found in all 5 checklists today, like 5 checklists were uploaded, and it was found in 5 out of 5 checklists. Bird B was found in only 3 out of 5 checklists. That means that the frequency of reporting of bird A is 100%. The frequency of reporting of bird B is 60%. Now, bird A, let's say 10 years down the line, we again look at the frequency of reporting in an area and find out that it's actually become 40%. That means that there's been a decline in the reporting of this bird, which then means that this bird should become a conservation priority. So this is a way to have evidence-based prioritization for conservation. So this, taking the entire eBird data, analyzing it, using some statistics to remove certain biases that might be there in eBird data, we found out what the status of house sparrow was. So this is house sparrow. There have been a lot of narratives for house sparrow that it has declined. It's a bird that requires major support in India. It's declined because of mobile towers, radiation, etc., etc. Many things have been said. But actually, the data itself shows that house sparrow is stable over the last 25 years. Many birds in India are declining, but not house sparrow in the country as a whole. But how can this be? Because we have all even noticed house sparrows declining in front of our eyes. Isn't that right? That is because house sparrows have declined in the cities. So this graph that you see that shows that house sparrows have declined by almost 50% in the cities, but have remained almost stable in the country as a whole. So this is an important insight. What we perceive need not actually be the objective truth. And what this analysis and many other small bits of research around the world show that radiation, mobile towers, none of this is there any evidence that it has affected house sparrows in any way at all? I'll answer this question that was asked later. And quickly, Indian peafowl has shown a phenomenal increase over the years. Now, for all of you as ornithologists, this is an important question to ask. What are the ecological implications of peafowl increasing? What are the ecological implications of pigeons increasing so much? So this has to be, you have to find out what it's doing to the rest of the ecosystem. There are many worries that peafowl increasing so much might affect snakes, might affect lizards. What is happening? I mean, in one way, it is something to celebrate that our national bird has increased so much. But all of this, anything like this can have impacts on the ecosystem. So it's something to ask. Now, this idea then can go to researchers, professional researchers, to actually design a study and to find out something more about why this might be happening, what the implications might be. Arctic shorebirds, a group that requires major support now across the world. You see the red line, they've declined by more than 70% in the country as a whole. And this matches trends from their breeding areas. So now all of these results, all of this was part of the State of India's Birds Report in 2020. The next State of India's Birds Report is coming out in July this year. So look out for it. There'll be updated trends with updated methods and better methods, and it'll be wonderful if all of you can engage with the report, ask questions, help improve it, and take results to your local bodies, to local policymakers, to conservation organizations, and tell them, so this is what the data and evidence says. And this is what we should be using for prioritizing conservation and not up perceptions alone. Golden plover, just an example of how it's declined by almost 90% in India today compared to 25 years back. And that's almost identical to what has been observed in Singapore. State of India's Birds Report last time and now will come out with prioritization categories. There'll be species that are high priority, moderate priority, and low priority. And last time there were 101 species that were high priority. This time we're yet to see what these numbers would be like. So there are many opportunities and challenges. This is the end of my lecture. There is an opportunity to have more systematic monitoring efforts, something that all of you can initiate, all of you can maybe encourage citizen groups in your areas to do. Use available resources to ask more questions because the data is there. The data is there. The possibility of learning how to analyze the data is also there. Please analyze the data and find out more and more about birds in our country. There's a challenge of curation of data quality as more and more people participate in citizen science. I just want you to keep this in mind because curation of data quality of citizen science programs is a very big challenge because there are people of all experiences who are uploading this information. So there need to be good processes that are maintaining data quality and learn how to analyze data. There are some tutorials on the Bird Count India YouTube channel. Do visit. There is a tutorial on how to download and analyze data using R. And I strongly recommend that you watch this video because it might seem difficult using R or any other programming language, but it's actually very simple. Watch the video, follow the steps. You can publish your own papers. There are many people who can support you, including me, through this process. So feel free to get in touch if you're analyzing data and you want to produce any kind of knowledge out of the data. And yeah. And a nice thing to leave everybody with, publications from the citizen community are increasing. There are many people who are not professional scientists who have other jobs who are increasingly publishing papers or articles about birds. And you can again look at what new publications have come out from the birdwatcher community on the eBird website actually. And this is a little old now, but a number were published even in 2022. And most of these publications don't involve professional scientists at all. So just shows that this loop can be completed, and this is like really citizen science in the way that it should work. My email ID for everybody is ashwinv2005@gmail.com. I'm just going to type it into the chat, but you can always get such information from Sonia. Yeah, so feel free to contact me with any questions you have or anything that I can help with. I'll quickly take these two questions. There's a question about what factors are taken into consideration when deciding the time duration for the SYB report. Yes, it's been 3 years. In this particular case, so 3 or 4 years is what many global assessments also take into account, because it's sufficient time to actually have something change, to be able to have a new, let's say, have some new guidelines on what to do. It's enough time for change and enough time for also anything that we implement based on one State of India's birth report, anything to be for that to also take some effect in the next few years. So, but in this particular case, this was driven mostly by COVID. So during the COVID period, things changed a little bit. There was some uncertainty about what happened to the data really. So it took some time to understand how to analyze the data best for the next report.
Sir,
Yeah.
this is Lakshmi, the
Yeah.
one who asked question.
Yes.
Sir, when it comes to COVID, doesn't actually during the COVID, the normal daily bird watcher would have seen a drastic change, or at least a bit of a change in the normal birding experience, no? So like, as there were a lot of lockdowns so that the birds were more in number in many places. So doesn't that skew the report of SOI in some way or the other?
So
Because
yeah.
it's not a normal phenomenon, it was an abnormal phenomenon. So how does that is factored into this report, sir?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There are certain statistical steps that are in place to account for that, especially differences in the amount of time people have spent birding and how they've been birding. So there are ways to account for that effort, and I can take you through the statistics at some point. But also there was a separate analysis that that one person did comparing both the quantity and quality of eBird data during the pandemic years with before and after. And it appears that outside a few cities, not much has changed. In India, people, aside from April and May 2020 and 21, it appears that we were largely resilient to the pandemic in terms of our ability to watch birds, or our desire to watch birds rather. So people continued watching birds in very similar intensities in all months except those two during 2020 and 2021. And this is something that I'll certainly share with everybody when it's published, because it's a nice complicated analysis, and I'll share with everyone. And I'll just, I know it's getting late for everyone, I'll just answer your other question, Lakshmi, about Blight's Reed Warbler and Indian Blue Robin range map. Yes, there are many areas in, especially in temperate parts of the world, in parts of Russia, etc., which are quite, which don't have many people. And those areas you'll see a lot of blanks where there aren't many bird watchers. So hopefully one day, whoever few people live there will also start uploading their observations, and those gaps will be filled.
Is there any other this kind of a platform or something which might help in plugging the holes, sir? Like, yes, eBird is there, it's a huge platform, but still it is in a nascent stage in India, and not many people know of it or are wary of it. So is there any other platform from where we can get to know data or information, sir?
So in India, there are multiple platforms in India and around the world. So it's worth looking at every platform to see what information is there. iNaturalist, India Biodiversity Portal, both have some very interesting information, especially about species occurrence in some areas where maybe there isn't as much data on eBird, because eBird is a slightly different, slightly more systematic platform. So things might be a little different. But it's worth looking at all of these platforms, multiple platforms, to see whether any of these gaps are filled. But finally, the most important thing is they have to be bird watchers. And without bird watchers, there's simply no data. So in some of these places, if there are no bird watchers, then the challenge is not really to find the correct platform, but the challenge is to introduce birds to people. in those areas.
This is where Sachinji's the question comes in, sir. So as more and more people bird, we get to know more and more information, and because
Correct,
of that, we might have known the new migratory route which you had mentioned, sir. Is that be the reason also?
So
Because of
as I said, that depends. So you need additional evidence, of course. You also need to look at how much data has been uploaded in the past. So all of this you can get from the data itself to see whether those areas were birded previously or not. So for example, now Bangalore is extremely well birded. If from next year we start finding a new species, let's say something like flamingos coming to Bangalore regularly every year, it's not much of a jump to say that it's a new phenomenon. Because now for the last 20-25 years, Bangalore has been extremely well birded. So there are no gaps here. So you need to deal with this on a case-by-case basis to decide whether there's anything, where there's a new phenomenon or not.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I think our time is also
It is.
at the end, I
Time's
think.
up. Yes.
So if there are no more questions, then I think we can wrap this session today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And I hope you'll write to me if you have more questions or you have any desire to analyze data or learn more about citizen science.
I think thank you, Ashwin, for the nice session and informative session. And
Thank you.
yeah, so if everyone has any further questions, if you cannot because of the time limit, if you couldn't put the questions in the chat box, you can always put in the discussion forum. So from that, I will so I'll be probably troubling you, bothering you again, Ashwin, for the questions, I guess, if they put in the discussion forum.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay then.
Yeah, and thanks, Sonia. Thanks for
Thanks.
coordinating
Thanks,
this.
everyone.
Bye.
Okay, everyone. Bye.